And I think nowadays, with all the digital technology, we have so many more resources for getting those voices and ideas out and making them accessible and durable. So I think it's tremendously helpful. Maybe it'll bring more people back into the arts.
I hope so.
Without making it, I think one of the primary things that we have to overcome in our culture is that art necessarily has to be professional. It's done by professionals. So I can't sing like Whitney Houston, so I shouldn't sing. I should be embarrassed about singing.
Right.
You know, I love that. There's a little quote in Art and Fear, and it's by a Japanese teacher. I have to get his name, because I thought it was attributed to Ted Orland initially, but it's somebody else who was asked by his young daughter, "What'd you do today, Dad?" "Well, I taught my students how to draw." She said, "Oh, they forget?" It's just absolutely lovely. You know, just right. I mean, everybody draws. Right. Not everybody is Dürer or Michelangelo.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that everybody can't draw. No, absolutely anybody can draw. All you have to do is make a mark. Yeah. And there are certain ways of thinking visually that drawing facilitates in a way that no other tool does, regardless of whether you use a stylus or a pen and a piece of paper. I always go somewhere with pen and paper. I'm surprised I'm actually sitting here without a pen in my pocket and a piece of paper in my back pocket. You know, at least something, so if an idea comes by, you know, I catch it. And so when I actually sit down in the studio and do some of that organization, it's not like I'm just trying to find the thoughts. It's like I'm trying to organize the thousands of ideas that I've accumulated over the last 15 years. And then I'd have to decide, okay, what small percentage do I produce this year with the limited time that I have? And I try and make it count. To some degree, I'm looking at how you expand and develop a single body of work. You know, I really relate to Richard Mizrak's work in that his whole body of work could be seen as an epic on the desert Southwest. And to some degree, I see that same sense of epic quality with my interest in wastelands. There are multiple reasons why I photograph wastelands. You noticed, many people noticed, that there are no organisms in the majority of my work. There are a few exceptions, but really I'd like to marginalize those because of the statement I'm making, that I'm photographing wastelands. There's an ecological dimension to that, and we should probably talk about Elliot Porter's influence on me as a young man. But there's a cultural implication here as well, kind of reading T.S. Eliot's Wasteland, that I think that we're, in many cases, as modern existentialists, we're living in a cultural wasteland. And part of what we've lost is that direct, primal, spiritual contact with nature. So finding a spiritual tradition today for modern man is very difficult. You know, it's Jung's modern man in search of his soul, right? So how does modern man find an authentic spiritual tradition? You know, the West is going out to the East to try and find more vital ways of participating with that. You know, whether they stay with their own tradition or reach out to others, there's a great hunger for that. There is a kind of a cultural vacuum, a wasteland. So that's one of the wastelands I'm talking about here. Yeah. I'm also doing wastelands as an ecological statement. It comes from having a lot of conversations with Elliot Porter and reading a lot of Jacques Cousteau. I don't think it's a coincidence that I'm making unpeopled wastelands and photographing either in the ocean, which Cousteau described in many of the places that he visited when he first invented the aqualung as deserts, devoid of the biotic diversity he used to see, and what we consider deserts. Eliot also was very influential to me in terms of the notion of or the desire to go to Antarctica, but it had to wait quite a long time. Yeah. And so I went, and it was really stimulating, challenging experience, which both fulfilled a lot of hopes and dreams and also brought a lot of other issues that were in the work up to the front and taught me a lot about the evolution of technology and process. With respect to technology and process, to be able to work on a portable computer with a digital camera and see the images, and in some cases process them on site, was huge. And I think there's something about being on a boat which really helped foster this process. We would go out in the Zodiac, so we would shoot, or we'd be shooting on deck, and we'd go into our cabins, download, and be able to process as we're moving to the next destination. You know, I've noticed when I'm out in Death Valley this spring that, you know, while I shoot, I'm not necessarily downloading as the car is bumping along, and getting the instant feedback of what happened, and getting instant feedback both on the back of the camera and very close to instant feedback by sorting and looking at things in relationship to each other on the computer helped me understand what was going on during that process and be able to understand what the subject had to offer and how I was relating to the subject, what kinds of images I was making, and how I might want to shift tack based on what I'm seeing to move the project further along. So to go on 2 trips and in both cases come away with finished bodies of work, like get off the boat with finished bodies of work, was a milestone for me. Like usually all of the finishing happens long after the fact, and it was just a tremendously stimulating process there. It was also stimulating because the other people that were there, I mean, never mind Stephen Johnson and I sharing cabins, right? I mean, Stephen is like a purist, right? He will not retouch the Coke can. He even is kind of conflicted about should he take the Coke can out, right? He wants to make a very direct representation of what's before the lens. And he's trying to advance the whole notion of straight photography up to a level where it's never been, that it's never achieved before. And I appreciate that. Luckily, he does appreciate other people's use of the medium. But it was very funny to walk into the cabin. You know, he'd gotten in there first on our first voyage, and like, okay, I got to get this clear. I don't consider you to be a photographer. It's what you do is more like painting or sculpture or, you know, something else. Just, Stephen, look, we've been having this conversation for over 10 years, and you know that we have far more in common than that we have differences. Let's have fun with these questions, because they're going to go on for another 10 years and hopefully 40. You know, really glad that you're out there. But not everybody thinks like you, you know, and just like lighten up a little bit here.
Does he shoot digital or?
Oh, absolutely. No, he is one of the pioneers on large format digital capture. And it was when I saw his images made with a scanning back that I realized film is history, just completely history. I mean, he was making these wall-sized blow-ups that were tack sharp without any noise. He was able to capture 2, 3, 4 extra stops. And one of the things that's really helpful to him is the representation of pastel colors that aren't oversaturated and rendered a little too heavy. So just within this very impressionist palette, he's able to achieve a level of accuracy that the previous materials couldn't. And I saw that and realized, yeah, no, it's just a matter of time. Let me sum it up. As Cartier-Bresson said, yes. What I mean by that is a lot of people will come up to me and say, well, do you pre-visualize your images? And I think a lot of people have been misinterpreting what Weston and Adams were saying when they came up with the term pre-visualization. It wasn't that they knew exactly what they were going to get at the moment of exposure, but it was that they had a pretty good idea and they had materials that would allow them to get where they wanted to go. It was very much an interpretive process. If the negative is the score and the print is the performance, it's very much an interpretive process that comes along the way. And I don't think Ansel knew exactly how he was going to interpret it. You can't say that. If you look at the moonrise over Hernandez over every decade, it gets heavier and contrastier and more baroque and dramatic. Right? His vision evolves. Right? So pre-visualization, the idea of trying to do the majority of the work in camera, kind of the apex of selection. Like, do all of your exposure controls, your composition within the frame, right? And then go ahead and try and faithfully reproduce that, possibly with some interpretation. You know, do I do that? Absolutely. How often? Used to be about 25% of the time. Was it enough? No. If that was all I could do with the camera, I wouldn't be working with photography as my primary medium. All right.